Welcome to Fellowship Safaris, conversations about people of color and their journeys to subspecialist training in their countries of origin and around the world. My name is Njeri Karianjahi. I am a girl born, raised, and initially educated in Nairobi, Kenya. And I am a medical doctor who's specialized in pediatrics, and so that's the care of children and adolescents. And I took that a step further to do adolescent medicine. And this is the more specific care of teens and young people. I am the first adolescent medicine specialist in Kenya. There are healthcare professionals who are working with adolescents in Uganda and in Nigeria, in Ghana, and in South Africa that I know of. And part of this is to try and figure out who else is out there, and so to build up on that network even more. I got into medicine because I wanted to help, and I like being practical in how I help people, and more specifically with adolescents, I felt that they're not well understood and they're not well represented, especially in the medical space. We have over 200 million adolescents who live in sub-Saharan Africa alone, and about almost a quarter of the world's population of adolescents lives in Africa. And when you think about how many subspecialists in adolescent medicine serve that population, it's a very small number. I am in a position to create safe, healthy health spaces for young people, and also to be able to be part of the most dynamic decade of their lives. This podcast is for medical or healthcare professionals who are thinking about going into a more subspecialist training and just getting a better sense of what goes into that training. My hope is that this podcast will bear witness to the journeys of various professionals who've gone through fellowship training and different facets and aspects of their lives and journeys, as well as being able to get tips and tricks that you wouldn't typically get on the websites when you're doing applications for fellowship. I have a different take on experiences. For me, I have come to respect the process of bearing witness. Bearing witness gives us an opportunity to be able to help other people. I don't believe in hoarding information. Information it's something that should be shared and help the next person be able to meet their goals and objectives. I have had the opportunity to stand on the shoulders of great men and women in this country and globally. What can you as a doctor expect to hear from my podcast? I am hoping that doctors will be able to hear about how different skill sets come together and how that comes together with passion for a particular, subject matter. I think it's also important for doctors to hear just how far your dreams and wishes can beba you or carry you, and how much more work you need to do to get to the finish line. I also think that it's important to count the cost. And I say that from the perspective of, it sounds very dreamy, especially when you see doctors who have gone out of the country. We're in Maju, you're in the UK, you're in Australia, you're in Canada, and somebody's out on sponsorship, but then it's not free at the same time. So it's really important to really count the cost from the perspective of what resources you have, what resources you're expected to use versus what the return on your investment is. what are some of the topics we'll talk about? It's difficult to talk about fellowship and not talk about my family and not talk about my friends. This is not a journey that has been taken in isolation. So the part that includes my husband, my daughter, my family, my friends, is a really big part of my story, because we made the journey together with my family when I was going to do my fellowship. And that was a whole experience for my husband and I to figure out living in a new country, to dealing with winter, to dealing with a new school system for my daughter, the impact your environment will have on you and how different you will be as a person. The person who got on the plane and traveled and the person who comes back at the end of fellowship has gone through a process, and you're not the same. You're not the same person who comes back in, and how that will impact you and will impact those around you. It has changed some of the ways you make decisions, some of the ways you prioritize different things. And changing the status quo is uncomfortable for a lot of people. And just sort of leaning into that discomfort and allowing us to have a conversation about it. Other topics that we will talk about is learning while Black, learning while being a Black woman. And I promise it's not going to be Diary of a Mad Black Woman. No, it's going to be more of just understanding what it is to walk into a space and you're the only Black person in the room, and the impact it has on your mental health, the impact it has on your ability to learn, as well as your ability to be able to assert yourself, as well as celebrate African training, because African medical training is amazing. It's practical. It's actually really, really good. I also want to be able to talk about code switching, because we do English exams. For those people who've flown out of the country, you have to do some English exam to prove to people that you've been speaking English all along, but now it's English that they understand. So now, after you can speak the English that they can understand, you realize that there's an alternate language in the hospital that you go to. And I know doctors were always accused of using all these, are you going to do the CBC, the ESR, the UEC? But now you can imagine having to learn those CBC, UEC, all that stuff in another lingo that's not Grey's Anatomy. It looks like Grey's Anatomy, but it's not Grey's Anatomy. And so just learning that code switch and realizing you're not an idiot in that space and you're going to learn. If you're not a medical practitioner, will this podcast help you understand the lives of healthcare workers in fellowship better? Absolutely. I think you would absolutely want to listen to this conversation, because we do not live in a vacuum as healthcare professionals. We have communities around us. We have people who want to partner and work with us. We have people who are just curious about the different things that we do. So it's not just for healthcare professionals, it's for their families, their friends, for people who'd like to partner and sponsor all these healthcare workers who want to be able to get this fellowship training. Outside of the academic piece, we're still humans and we go through life, and hoping that this podcast will help people better understand our lifing process around our academics. I'm so glad you stayed tuned. Please get the word out and share it with at least 3 people. Make this episode like a chain letter. Share it, share it, share it. Come back for the next leg of our safari, where we'll be talking about my fellowship safari. It takes a village to make this podcast. Strategic and creative direction was done by Njeri Karianjahi and Melissa Mbogwa. The producer of the show is Melissa Mbogwa. Tevin Sudi is the sound engineer, with thanks to AQ Studios. The graphic design was done by Benjamin Boyer, and the original music was done by husband extraordinaire Mwakavi Maweo. This is an Africa Podfest production.